Chicago glittered beneath the cold reflection of Lake Michigan, but inside the Mercer Foundation's charity gala, Laurel Vance could feel danger moving beneath the polished surface. For 4 years, Laurel had worked inside Mercer Holdings as a financial compliance specialist. She was 28, calm under pressure, precise with numbers, and difficult to intimidate. Executives trusted her because she rarely made mistakes. That was exactly why she had discovered the one thing she was never supposed to find. Mercer Holdings publicly controlled shipping companies, hotels, real estate developments, and private security firms. Behind those legitimate businesses stood the Mercer family, one of Chicago's most feared criminal organizations. For months, Laurel had traced irregular freight movements through companies that appeared clean on paper. The routes did not carry drugs or weapons. They carried people. Undocumented workers were being moved under false employment contracts into dangerous labor sites. Several Black and Latino workers who reported injuries had disappeared from payroll systems entirely, as if their lives to be erased with a few keystrokes. That was the moment Laurel stopped thinking about loyalty. The gala round was filled with politicians, donors, executives, and wealthy families praising Mercer charitable projects, while music drifted beneath crystal chandeliers. From a private business lounge overlooking the lake, Laurel completed the transfer, shipping manifests, hidden payroll files, security logs, shell company records. Everything went to a federal corruption task force. She knew what the Mercer family would call it if they discovered her role. Betrayal. Laurel called it evidence. Her greatest uncertainty was Ronan Mercer. At 34, Ronan had inherited control after his father's sudden death 2 years earlier. He was unusually young for a man with that much power, tall and broad to the shoulders, with dark hair, gray-blue eyes, tattooed hands, a sharp jaw, and a light beard. He did not rule through public explosions of anger. He ruled through control. That made him harder to read. Laurel had never found proof that Ronan personally authorized the hidden labor routes, but she could not decide whether that made him innocent or simply careless enough to profit from crimes he never bothered to examine. Less than 5 minutes after the files were sent, the atmosphere inside the gala changed. Mercer Security quietly sealed 2 private exits. A security director checked his phone and immediately crossed the ballroom toward the executive wing. Then Laurel received a warning from the federal contact she had trusted. The message contained only a broken attachment and enough corrupted metadata to tell her something had gone catastrophically wrong. Someone inside the task force had exposed her. Laurel left through a service corridor before Mercer Security reached the lounge. She did not go home. One of the missing workers had survived and was hiding near the South Loop. If Laurel could reach him first, she might still save the case. A dark vehicle appeared behind her 3 blocks from the hotel. It stayed there through 2 turns. Then another vehicle blocked the street ahead. Laurel understood too late. Men moved toward her before she could reach the witness. The attack was fast, controlled, and professional. Her vision blurred as she fell against the pavement. The last thing Laurel clearly saw was another black vehicle stopping hard at the curb. Ronan Mercer stepped out. The armed men around Laurel scattered. Hours later, Laurel opened her eyes expecting fluorescent hospital lights or a federal interrogation room. Instead, she was lying inside Ronan Mercer's private mansion. Laurel woke to the sound of waves striking rock below the cliffs. For several seconds, she did not move. Her shoulder burned beneath a clean bandage, but there were no restraints around her wrists, no armed man waiting beside the bed, and no locked door separating her from a hallway. That confused her more than captivity would have. The guest suite overlooked Lake Michigan through tall windows framed by bare winter trees and pale gardens. Beyond the glass, security vehicles moved along the private drive. She was inside Ronan Mercer's mansion. A physician had treated her injuries during the night and left detailed instructions on a bedside table. No threat accompanied them. Laurel did not mistake that for safety. She had leaked evidence capable of destroying part of the Mercer empire. Hospitality from a man whose family she betrayed could disappear the moment he decided she was no longer useful. Ronan found her awake less than an hour later. He did not arrive with guards. He carried a tablet containing several pages from the files Laurel had sent to the federal task force. That was when the situation became stranger. Ronan did not deny the labor operation. Instead, he showed her the companies connected to it. Several were technically affiliated with Mercer Holdings, but they did not report through his current chain of command. Their internal approvals carried authorization codes that belonged to his father. Those codes should not have existed. They had been destroyed after Victor Mercer's funeral 2 years earlier. Laurel felt the implications settle heavily. Someone had been using the authority of a dead man to move money, workers, and contracts through the family network. Then Ronan showed her photographs from the attack. The men who tried to kill her were not Mercer security. Their vehicles, weapons, and encrypted radios were registered through a private contractor tied to Councilman Everett Sloan, one of Chicago's most influential political figures and a longtime Mercer business ally. Laurel immediately suspected misdirection. Ronan had every reason to push suspicion away from his family. Then he showed her the recovered bullet. Ballistics matched ammunition used in the unsolved murder of a Mercer internal auditor 8 months earlier. Ronan had believed that auditors stole company money before disappearing from the organization. Now Laurel saw another possibility. The man may have discovered the same network she had, and someone had silenced him before she ever opened the first file. The most unexpected moment came when Ronan admitted the part he could not excuse. Mercer companies had profited from the hidden routes. He claimed he had not authorized the exploitation, but Laurel refused to let ignorance become innocence. A man who controlled an empire was still responsible for what that empire rewarded. Ronan did not argue. That unsettled her more than anger would have. By afternoon, another problem surfaced. Laurel's federal contact had vanished within hours of the leak. Someone was not simply protecting the Mercer operation. Someone was cleaning both sides of it. Ronan gave Laurel temporary access to the mansion's secure financial archive because she understood the accounting pattern better than anyone else. She traced a series of concealed payments through a Mercer charitable housing fund. The money did not lead to Ronan. It did not lead to his younger brother. It led to Evelyn Mercer, Ronan's widowed aunt and the woman who had practically raised him after his mother died. Laurel opened the final authorization record. The payment had been approved on the exact night Ronan's father died. By evening, snow had begun sweeping across Lake Michigan hard enough to erase the shoreline. Roads near the estate became dangerous. Private flights were grounded, and the Mercer mansion settled into an uneasy lockdown. The storm did not create the danger. It trapped everyone close enough to feel it. Laurel and Ronan moved their investigation into the glass winter garden at the rear of the mansion, a bright enclosed space filled with bare vines, stone planters, and tall windows now covered in snow. Ronan's father had used the room for private family meetings. That detail mattered. Behind a built-in cabinet, Laurel found a narrow drawer filled with handwritten financial notes Victor Mercer had never entered into the digital system. Ronan had never searched them. He had believed his father died from a sudden medical complication. The notes challenged that belief almost immediately. Victor had written repeatedly about irregular political payments connected to Councilman Everett Sloan. Several entries referenced Evelyn Mercer by initials and warned that certain legitimate companies were being used to hide activity he no longer controlled. Then Laurel found something more dangerous. Victor had been preparing to separate several profitable legal businesses from the Mercer criminal structure. If he succeeded, senior family members would have lost enormous influence, money, and protection. For the first time, Ronan had to consider that his father's death may not have simply created a succession. It may have completed one. Laurel compared Victor's authentic signatures against the authorizations she had traced earlier. The forged documents were too accurate to come from scanned copies. Someone had studied the pressure, spacing, and small imperfections of his handwriting that required physical access. Evelyn had it. So did Chase Mercer. Chase was Ronan's 36-year-old cousin, polished, educated, and publicly responsible for Mercer logistics. He had spent years presenting himself as a dependable relative who kept the family's business moving while Ronan handled larger decisions. Laurel reopened the files she had leaked. This time, she recognized several logistics codes buried beneath routing labels. They belonged to Chase. Her original betrayal had not exposed one hidden operation. It may have uncovered the edge of an internal takeover. Ronan's anger was immediate, but it was not directed at Laurel. It turned inward. He had inherited power. control men who feared him, and still failed to see what was happening inside his own structure. Laurel noticed the difference. He was dangerous, but he was not careless enough to ignore evidence once it was placed in front of him. Without warning Chase, Ronan began quietly removing his access to internal systems. More importantly, he allowed Laurel to keep copies of everything they found. That decision changed something between them. So did his admission that he had already been investigating missing workers before her leak. He had suspected an outside trafficking network. He had never considered his own family. The revelation did not make him innocent. It made the truth more complicated. Then the storm knocked out a secondary security grid near the rear greenhouse. A shadow moved beyond the glass corridor. Laurel saw a man crossing the service passage before backup power returned. For 1 second, his profile looked familiar. Then he vanished. Beneath Victor Mercer's old desk, they found a sealed envelope that had not been there earlier. Inside was a photograph of Evelyn Chase and Councilman Sloan standing together at a private Mercer vineyard shortly before Victor's death. Laurel turned it over. Written on the back was a date 3 days in the future. The date on the photograph changed everything. Ronan saw proof of an old conspiracy. Laurel saw an appointment. 3 days later, after the storm cleared enough to reopen the roads, they drove to the Mercer family vineyard in southwest Michigan. The property was not chosen because it was beautiful, though it was. Dormant vines stretched across rolling hills beneath pale winter sunlight. Stone buildings stood beyond the fields. An historic tasting house looked almost peaceful. That made the purpose of the meeting feel even colder. Ronan could not trust ordinary family security. Chase controlled too much of the protection network, and sending Mercer guards ahead would only announce their arrival. Laurel insisted on going with him. If documents were being exchanged, she was the one most likely to recognize what they meant. They entered the property before the scheduled meeting and found a concealed office behind the tasting room. Laurel opened the first locked file cabinet. Inside were property transfer agreements prepared to move several Mercer logistics companies into a new holding group. The effective dates all depended on one condition: Ronan losing control. Someone was not simply planning against him. Someone expected him to be removed. Ronan found the next file himself. Life insurance records. His name appeared first. Miles Mercer, his younger brother, appeared second. The beneficiary structure had been buried behind layers of trust, but Laurel traced it far enough to identify one person positioned to profit: Chase. For the first time, the conspiracy stopped looking like an internal financial war and started looking like a family waiting for 2 men to die. Then Evelyn arrived with Councilman Everett Sloan. Chase was nowhere in sight. From an adjoining storage corridor, Laurel and Ronan listened. The conversation confirmed Evelyn had been shielding Chase politically while Sloan protected a hidden operation through city contracts and redevelopment approvals. But Laurel noticed something Ronan initially missed. Evelyn was afraid. She was not directing the meeting. She was surviving it. That meant the woman they suspected most might not be the architect, after all. Then Sloan referred to someone as the heir. Ronan immediately assumed Chase. Laurel did not. The financial language was wrong. The transfer structure required someone younger, someone who would legally inherit voting shares if both Ronan and Miles were removed. There was only one person who fit: Tessa Mercer, Ronan's 22-year-old half-sister. She had been kept away from the family business and was studying architecture in Boston. Ronan had always believed distance protected her from Mercer politics. Laurel found the proof minutes later. Tessa's trust had been quietly pledged as collateral across several hidden companies. Someone had built an entire succession plan around her identity without her knowledge. That was the intellectual shock Laurel could not ignore. Power did not always need a willing heir. Sometimes it only needed a legal name. Before they could leave, the security system activated. Every exit locked. Chase's voice came through the ceiling speakers. He did not sound surprised. He had known they would come. More disturbing, he revealed that Laurel's federal leak had never endangered his plan. It had helped him. The investigation, the panic, the pressure on Ronan, all of it had accelerated the transfer he wanted. Then Chase delivered the one sentence that stripped the room of every remaining certainty. Tessa had disappeared that morning. Tessa's disappearance turned the conspiracy from a succession scheme into something far more personal. Ronan and Laurel returned to Chicago immediately. He refused to unleash the Mercer family across the city in a violent search. Too many armed men, too many frightened relatives, and too much pressure could push whoever had Tessa into making a fatal decision. Laurel took a different route. She followed the paperwork. Using the trust records recovered at the vineyard, she traced a series of digital approvals tied to Tessa Mercer's name. Several had been signed during hours when university records showed Tessa sitting in class hundreds of miles away. The signatures were fraudulent. The purpose was clearer now. Someone intended to make it appear that Tessa had willingly transferred voting control of key Mercer companies to Chase. If Ronan was arrested, removed, or killed, Chase could step forward with documents claiming legitimate authority through her. That was when Laurel fully understood why her federal leak had helped him. Chase wanted pressure from law enforcement at the exact moment he was engineering a family succession. The betrayal Laurel thought had damaged his plan had actually created the chaos he needed. Tessa's Chicago apartment showed no sign of forced entry. Nothing was broken. Nothing had been searched. Security footage showed her leaving the building willingly with one person, Miles Mercer, Ronan's younger brother. For several seconds, Ronan said nothing. Miles had always been a relative he trusted without reservation. Laurel refused to accept the obvious conclusion too quickly. She replayed the footage. Then she noticed it. Tessa looked frightened. Miles glanced directly toward the hallway camera and made a brief, deliberate motion with his hand before guiding her outside. He was not hiding from the camera. He wanted someone to notice him. Laurel concluded that Miles had been trying to move Tessa before Chase's people reached her. The apartment offered one more clue. Among Tessa's architecture sketches was a drawing that looked unfinished until Laurel noticed a sequence of room numbers worked into the lines. Ronan recognized the building immediately. An abandoned Mercer restoration project on the west side. Tessa had helped redesign it years earlier. They reached the property before sunset. Inside, they found Miles injured but alive near an unfinished stairwell. Tessa was gone. Miles explained that Chase's men had intercepted them less than an hour earlier. He had managed to get Tessa away from the apartment, but not far enough. Then he revealed the truth about Evelyn. She had tried to help them. For years, Chase had controlled her by threatening to expose crimes committed by her late husband. Her cooperation had not come from loyalty. It had come from fear. That left Chase at the center of everything. He had spent years positioning himself to inherit the family, while allowing Ronan to carry its danger, its enemies, and its public blame. Miles handed Laurel a phone Tessa had dropped during the attack. One unfinished recording remained. Tessa's frightened voice mentioned Chase, the Mercer family, and a gathering where he intended to present her publicly as the rightful heir. The gathering was scheduled for the next afternoon, at Ronan's mansion, the same house where Laurel had first awakened believing she was the prisoner. By the next afternoon, Ronan's mansion no longer felt like his home. It felt like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. The Mercer family council had always met there during succession disputes, and Chase understood the symbolism perfectly. If he could remove Ronan inside the family's most protected property, he would not simply take power. He would make the takeover look legitimate. Laurel understood the strategy before most of the family arrived. Chase planned to combine 3 weapons at once: Tessa's forged voting authority, federal pressure created by Laurel's leak, and evidence of Ronan's genuine crimes. That last part mattered most. Ronan could not simply call everything a lie. Some accusations were true. Laurel warned him that defeating Chase would require something more painful than protecting his position. He would have to stop protecting the entire Mercer structure. Ronan accepted the consequence. Then he gave Laurel unrestricted access to the records capable of damaging him as well as Chase. That decision changed the space between them. For the first time, Ronan was trusting the woman who had already betrayed his family with the power to destroy what remained of it. By mid-afternoon, relatives filled the main hall beneath the tall lake-facing windows. Tessa was brought in under guard. She was frightened but visibly unharmed. Chase entered moments later carrying legal documents that claimed Ronan's leadership had endangered the family financially, politically, and criminally. Some of the evidence was impossible to dispute. Laurel did not try. Instead, She placed the forged trust records beside Chase's documents and traced the hidden labor companies, political payments, and fraudulent transfers through Tessa's identity. Chase immediately attacked her credibility. She was a traitor who had gone to federal agents. Laurel did not deny it. That was the intellectual blow he had not expected. A betrayal could still be morally justified when loyalty required silence about exploited people. Ronan shocked the room by confirming that she had every reason to expose what she found. Several relatives turned toward him in disbelief. Then Evelyn Mercer stepped forward. For years, fear had kept her obedient. This time, she brought the records Chase never expected her to release. They included medication schedules, private payments, and internal messages connected to Victor Mercer's final days. Laurel understood the pattern almost immediately. Chase had arranged a medication substitution that contributed to Ronan's father's death while preserving enough medical ambiguity to make it appear natural. The room changed. Relatives who had supported Chase began withdrawing from him. Councilman Sloan's protection collapsed minutes later when federal investigators arrived with independent warrants tied to the labor network and city contracts. For a moment, it looked finished. Then Laurel noticed Tessa was gone. So was Chase. Ronan reached the security console and pulled the last available camera feed. It showed Chase forcing Tessa through a service corridor toward the mansion's lower level. Ronan's expression hardened. Beneath the estate was an old lake tunnel built decades earlier for private transport. Laurel looked toward the frozen gray water beyond the windows. The tunnel exited directly onto the private dock, and a boat was already waiting. Ronan entered the tunnel, knowing the Mercer family might never survive what happened next. Laurel and Miles followed while federal agents secured the mansion above them. The passage beneath the estate had been built during Prohibition, when the original owners used the lake for discreet deliveries. Decades later, the Mercer family had adapted it for private transport. Now Chase intended to use it as an escape route. Cold air moved through the stone corridor toward the private dock. Laurel understood something before they reached the water. Chase was not running with Tessa alone. He needed leverage. The portable drive he carried contained financial records capable of destroying politicians, judges, contractors, and members of the Mercer family. Chase had survived for years because too many powerful people feared what he knew. Tessa finally understood how completely he had used her. Her trust, her signature, and her inheritance had all been turned into legal weapons without her consent. She refused to cooperate. Near the dock, Laurel stopped thinking like someone trapped inside a Chase and started thinking like an accountant. Chase could threaten to destroy the evidence, but he would never actually destroy his only insurance. That meant there had to be a backup. She remembered the old dock inventory records and pointed Miles toward a row of private storage lockers built into the tunnel wall. He found the drive exactly where she expected. By then, Ronan had reached Chase. The confrontation was tense but brief. Chase accused him of hypocrisy. Ronan had spent years running the same criminal empire, taking money through fear, extortion, and violence. He could not suddenly pretend to be morally superior because Chase had crossed lines he found personally unforgivable. Ronan did not deny it. That refusal mattered. The difference between them was not innocence. It was what each man chose when the truth finally became impossible to avoid. Chase pulled Tessa closer and tried to use her as leverage. Then Laurel stepped into view and revealed that the backup drive was already secured. For the first time, Chase looked powerless. His insurance was gone. Tessa broke free. Ronan reached him seconds later, and rage almost took over. Miles stopped him before the confrontation became an execution. Chase was arrested alive. That mattered because everything he knew could now be used in court. Above them, Sloan and several contractors were detained as warrants spread through the Mercer network. The family fractured almost immediately. Some relatives disappeared. Others began cooperating. Ronan made a decision that ended any possibility of rebuilding the old system. He turned over the hidden labor records and several financial accounts containing evidence of his own crimes. Laurel understood what he was choosing: not survival, accountability. Before investigators took him upstairs for questioning, Ronan transferred control of a victim compensation trust to Laurel. She refused to treat it as a romantic gesture. The money belonged to the people the organization had harmed. Then Tessa opened one final file from Chase's recovered drive. Laurel recognized the name instantly. The federal agent she had trusted from the beginning had been part of the conspiracy, and he was still free. Worse, he already knew where Laurel lived. Chase's arrest did not end the conspiracy. It only exposed how many people had been protected by it. The federal agent Laurel once trusted was identified through Chase's recovered files, but instead of confronting him publicly, Laurel worked with an independent prosecutor and an external legal team to build a case he could not escape. There was no gala, no dramatic stage, no room full of cameras. The final takedown happened through sealed filings, coordinated testimony, frozen accounts, and financial seizures carried out across Chicago. Laurel released evidence against Chase, Councilman Sloan, the corrupt agent, and the Mercer organization itself. It became her second betrayal of the family. This time, Ronan supported it. The corrupt agent tried to destroy Laurel's credibility by claiming she had become emotionally compromised by Ronan and manipulated evidence to protect him. Laurel answered with timestamps, independent records, preserved communications, and financial trails that existed long before any personal connection between them. His accusation failed because facts did not need her reputation to survive. The attack still revealed something Laurel had understood for years. When powerful men could not disprove a woman's evidence, they often tried to make the woman herself the scandal. This time, it did not work. Former workers testified under legal protection. Families forced from redevelopment properties received settlements. Several Black and Latino employees whose injuries had once been erased from company systems finally had their cases formally recognized. Tessa took control only of Mercer businesses that could operate transparently under outside oversight. Miles walked away from the criminal side entirely. Evelyn publicly admitted the concealment she had participated in and accepted the legal consequences. Chase faced charges tied to murder, trafficking-related conspiracy, kidnapping, and financial fraud. Ronan was not spared because he eventually chose the truth. He faced charges for extortion, illegal financial operations, and crimes that genuinely belonged to him. His cooperation mattered legally. It did not erase what he had done. Months later, Laurel began working from a converted Mercer charitable property in Chicago that now operated as a financial and legal advocacy center for workers, whistleblowers, and families targeted by coercive systems. The organization Ronan once controlled had no authority there. Neither did he. Laurel had no contract tying her to him, no protection arrangement, no obligation. Their relationship remained unresolved while Ronan dealt with the consequences of his choices. Much later, after his release under strict legal restrictions, he returned to the center alone. No guards followed him. No family title opened the doors. No criminal empire stood behind his name. Laurel did not speak to him because he had once saved her. She spoke to him because he had finally stopped asking the world to protect his power from the truth. What existed between them now was quieter, choice without ownership, connection without debt. Laurel had betrayed the Mercer family once to save people she had never met. She betrayed it a second time to destroy the system that had made all of them dangerous. And only then did she understand the strange truth about the mansion where she had once awakened terrified. She had believed that house was where she lost control of her life. In the end, it was where she first learned that the most dangerous man in the Mercer family was never necessarily the one sitting at the head of it.